On that later, but first, a confirmation hearing which is expected to see John Kerry becoming the head of the U.S. State Department has begun in Washington. The Democrat senator was nominated by President Obama to replace Hillary Clinton as the country's top diplomat. Well, to talk more on the potential challenges Kerry may face, I'm now joined by Daniel Wagner. He's Managing Director for the political and economic risk advisory firm Country Risk Solutions. Now, Hillary Clinton's term has had many challenging moments. Just how much work has she left for her successor, and is he up to the job, do you think?
I think we have to characterize much of what Hillary has accomplished as a work in progress. If we look in Libya, we look in Burma, we look so many places around the world, she has presided, if you will, over many of the things that are in motion now, and yet they have yet to be completed. So Mr. Kerry, assuming that he gets the nomination, and I think he will be approved, he's simply going to carry on, I believe, with much of the work that's already been done.
So continue with the same foreign policy that we've seen, and yet she has acknowledged, Hillary Clinton, that Arab revolutions have led to the spread of extremism. The US supported, of course, many of the changes, both politically and militarily, in those countries. Do you think that Kerry might be less inclined to get involved in other countries' affairs?
You know, I don't think I would characterize it that way. Mr. Kerry comes into the job having more experience in the foreign policy realm than Mrs. Clinton did by a long shot. He probably knows almost as many heads of state as she does. He's traveled widely. He's very familiar with many of the issues. My sense is that he's very much a realist and a pragmatist at the same time. So while we can expect him not to hesitate to make difficult calls, as any Secretary of State would, I also think he's going to be measured in terms of diving in, if you will, or promoting, suggesting military engagements where they aren't necessary. He's going to be very cognizant of some of the resource limitations, militarily, financially, and in terms of political limitations that the Obama administration is operating under. Right. And I think he's going to be cognizant of all of that going forward.
You talk about his experience as a diplomat. Last year, of course, saw a rise in anti-American sentiment in the Muslim world. How do you expect him to deal with that? That is a massive diplomatic challenge, is it not, for the US?
Well, he may be very well advised to leave it alone, if you will. It seems like, first of all, it's something that cannot be controlled if there were an inclination to try to control it in the first place. But wherever the U.S. has sort of stuck its finger in the Arab awakening, it hasn't ended well. And yet, of course, they want to be able to influence the process as much as possible. So my sense there is that he's going to try to influence policy, just as any Secretary of State would. But let's not forget that Mr. Obama, in some respects, has been his own Secretary of State. He's a very knowledgeable person in foreign affairs as in his own right, and I think ultimately he's going to work very closely with Mr. Kerry to call the shots. Mr. Kerry, of course, having served so long as the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is going to marshal his resources in Congress to hopefully to the benefit of the Obama administration.
Daniel, I've got to ask you.
I see a very sort of middle-of-the-road course.
All right, I'm in Moscow, you're in New York. We've got to talk about Russia-US relations. Interesting enough, Kerry has criticized US policy towards Russia, saying that the current state of relations between the two are poor. Do you think he'll be able to soothe existing tensions?
Well, let's think about that. You know, Mr. Obama is in place for another 4 years. And the Secretary of State works at the pleasure of the President and at the direction of the President. Mr. Putin certainly is in place for the next 4 years. So, you know, unless there's some meeting of the minds at the head of state level, I really don't know what impact the Secretary of State is going to be able to have. Mr. Lavrov, I don't know that he's going to be going anywhere in the next 4 years. It seems to me that the only place to go with bilateral relations between the U.S. and Russia right now is up. And my expectation and hope is that that will be one of the priorities that Mr. Kerry will put on his agenda starting this year.
We'll end on that positive note. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel Wagner, political and economic risk advisor, joining me live there in New York. Thanks.